Hey everybody, thank you for watching another video of mine. I'm sorry I didn't post any videos. I'm not gonna lie and make up anything. It's just I didn't have the motivation for it. That's one of my biggest flaws, if I were to be honest. Uh, that I lose motivation in any of my passions quite quickly, and then I have to rekindle it over and over and over again. I have to, figure out how to have constant motivation. I hope I am able to figure that out. Oh shit, I'm sorry. Welcome to Mikko's bedroom. I hope you like this video. This is why did the Soviet Union collapse? I want to make a historical video because the last video I made, I promised a video on history. And here it is. Now, a little bit of a disclaimer. Tomorrow morning, if I don't lose motivation again, I'm gonna start doing TV shows, reactions to. So I hope you like those. I want to do those from the start for this channel, but I want to just try it out a little bit to learn how to make videos, hence the history videos. But those will continue, don't worry. But this is just a little disclaimer. So let's see how the Soviet Union collapsed, because this is really interesting to me, and let's learn something.
As the Iron Curtain fell, over a dozen nations were finally freed from the heavy-handed grasp of the once powerful USSR.
Look how
From
big
its
it was.
foundation in 1922 until its final demise in 1991, the Soviet Union and its allies made up an incredibly significant portion of Europe, essentially filling out the entire eastern side of the continent. A global superpower at its peak, the USSR somehow only lasted a short 70 years.
Yeah.
How was this possible? And why, exactly, did the Soviet Union collapse?
This video is sponsored by Raid Shadow Game.
Let's skip this
factions in
little.
Played my final president of the Soviet Union.
Yeah, Gorbachev is hated in
His
Russia.
collection of alliances crumbled before him. One likely response: Chernobyl. The former president made it clear in 2006, 20 years after the nuclear meltdown occurred, that he truly believed this, above all else, was the final turning point into a steep decline for his Soviet Union.
Wasn't Chernobyl in
Whether
86?
this was the final straw or not for the Soviet people, it's no doubt that the Chernobyl tragedy was severely disastrous for the USSR. When the explosion occurred on April 26, 1986, the Soviet leadership immediately hoped to hide the startling problem from the
That was a mistake, in my opinion.
It was
Hiding it?
from the start to the first responders and government officials that this explosion posed an
Because even though it might be the logical knee-jerk reaction, hide it. Don't show weakness. But you're giving up weakness for because it will eventually come out. Let's be honest. You're giving up. You're gaining. You're giving up weakness for trust. You're gaining weakness. I don't know how should I say this, but you're not showing your weakness to the people and to the world that you could handle a nuclear reactor, but the trust, people won't trust you anymore if you hide something so potentially catastrophic that I don't know if thousands, tens of thousands of people suffered from.
enormous threat to the surrounding citizens, and the radioactive fallout it caused was roughly 400 times that of the Hiroshima atomic bomb.
Can you imagine that?
The Communist Party was desperate to cover it all up.
Yeah.
They gave no warning. And so May Day parades and other events continued to be held. Everyone went about their lives as normal, and no word was given. On May 14th, that President Gorbachev made his first public statement on the matter, during which he was very willing to downplay the reality of the failure and instead focus on bashing the West for what he called malicious lies and an over-exaggerated report of what had happened. It wasn't long before the truth came out, though, and the Soviet people became furiously aware of the corruption that they were under.
Well, yeah, I mean,
Particularly the failure of Glasnost. Glasnost was a policy enacted by Mikhail Gorbachev that was supposed to restore certain freedoms for the Soviet people, such as freedom of speech, press, and religion. It was intended to create a better way of life and more transparency from the government, and in some ways, it did work. But the newfound freedoms allowed the Soviet people to discover the government cover-up efforts of Chernobyl and expose their leadership's deep corruption, which
So
led to a
basically, by saying you're trying to do the right thing here, creating this policy of openness and trying to, give the people more freedoms and transparency, but that might have been your eventual downfall. So that's why politics is so great, because you might think, oh, I'm a good person, this is a good policy, I'm gonna do it. But then, will that policy that comes from, I'm imagining a good place, or maybe I don't know where it comes from, but it on paper, at least from what I'm reading here, sounds good. But in politics, sometimes to stay in power, you have to do the wrong thing. You know, that's the
drastic
and
decrease
not only staying in power, but for the better of everyone. Because after the collapse of the Soviet Union, people don't talk about it, but not only Russia, but there was all other Soviet republics were fucked.
public trust. This wasn't the only policy that would contribute to the Union's collapse, though. Another well-intended
Perestroika,
change was
Jesus
known
Christ.
as perestroika. The goal was to adopt a new economic system similar to modern-day China.
I
The
didn't know
mixed
that, though.
communist capitalist structure would allow for more market freedom, and the policy also opens the door for new democratic elections. The Communist Party would still remain in control even with these elections, but the freedom of choice was nevertheless believed to be a significant benefit for the Soviet people.
Okay, so why did it collapse?
This policy began to contribute to the crumbling of the Union, as citizens started to see the shifts as weaknesses. The reason why perestroika was enacted may have also been a relevant factor to the Soviet collapse. Though it
So
had pre-
by showing, by giving rights to people, they're like, oh, you're giving me this, so you must be weak. So I'm gonna take advantage of you. So the moral of the story is lie to the people and don't give them anything. Like that's so.
previously been remarkably successful, the Soviet economy was now falling apart. There was a brief stint of recovery around 1970, but that was short-lived, as the Afghanistan war became a new source of spending for the
Yeah.
Soviet government. This
Afghanistan.
greatly restrained the recovery path, and the citizens of the Union began to grow tired of living under a communist regime, with poverty plaguing the people and communism
That's why I think one of the reasons why communist China is still in power, because even though you're under a communist regime, you're wealthy or you're doing well. Hundreds of millions of people were driven out of poverty in China. So at the end of the day, if you're wealthy and happy, you'll be able to tolerate living under a communist regime. If you're poor and there's an authoritarian regime above you, you have nothing to lose. That's what I'm trying to say.
seeming to be the cause, there was a severe need for change, which is what would lead Mikhail Gorbachev's later reforms. But as we know, this produced yet one more failed attempt to shave the shaky foundations the government were trying to stand on. The nail that sealed the coffin for the end of the Soviet Union was the events of 1989. After years
Berlin.
of living under a Soviet shadow,
Yeah.
the Warsaw-pact satellite states of the Union, including Poland, Yugoslavia, and Czechoslovakia,
Hear that?
began to face their own challenges and the downfall of Soviet-friendly regimes.
Yeah, Romania got
Other
overthrown in
nearby
99.
communist allies, such as Romania, also faced revolts that would sever their ties to the Communist Union, and the Berlin Wall over in Germany would once and for all be torn down. Ethnic conflict, anti-communist sentiments, and overall disapproval was building even from within the USSR itself, and instead of putting an end to it, the government, yet again, failed. The reason why there was even an opportunity for the opposition that rippled throughout the East in 1989 was due to a poor strategy utilized by President Gorbachev in his bid to resurrect the Soviet economy. After spending years as a frequent critic and enemy to the US, Gorbachev decided that the best way to create his successful economic reforms would be to build a better relationship with the West, even though the United States particularly was still far from a potential friend for the Soviets. Hoping to calm these tensions as the first step toward friendship with the West, Gorbachev promised that the Soviet Union would withdraw from the nuclear arms race against the United States, and even reduce their own military presence throughout the globe. Gorbachev decided to subsequently pull out of the Afghanistan war and reduce Soviet military presence throughout their satellite states. This sudden deterioration of an overbearing military throughout the Warsaw Pact nations, and what appeared to be a weakening of international Soviet influence, is what would trigger the following events.
So, in politics, being a good leader, a good person, is not always the right thing. He was a weak leader. And while people might say that the collapse of the Soviet Union overall was a good thing, and I don't have a plus or a minus in that discussion. I have to research way more on this to have a real opinion to understand the consequences of its eventual downfall. The consequences of the downfall of the Soviet Union. People suffered from it because the government was in shambles. Uh, but yeah, from just the way it's portrayed, being a good person in politics, it's not always the right. It's never the right thing. In his case, he showed weakness. He showed weakness. I think his mistake, at least till this point in the video, was to take the troops from all the other satellite republics uh, uh, so fast, because they were an overbearing, as he said, an overbearing presence for so long, and then let's say from Friday to Monday, Friday they were there and Monday they were gone. You have to like slowly but surely discontinue the troops, not like right away.
Still, it wasn't just the withdrawal of military troops that hurt the USSR. It was
What else?
also the mere state of their military at the time.
Yeah,
The Stalin-era
horrible.
policy that prioritized the production of military equipment over consumer goods and basic necessities for the Soviet people was no more. And with the economy tanking, Gorbachev's military was crumbling too. The consequences of his perestroika drastically reduced military spending, and in turn, the military might of the Union. There were also external factors, including an arms reduction treaty that the Soviets had tried to push off for as long as possible until 1988.
So the Baltic
This
states.
required the Union to cut its military numbers by 500,000, while roughly 15,000 of the troops over in Afghanistan had been killed. Pushback against the draft only worsened the problem, and once standing at over 5.3 million strong in 1985, the Soviet military was now reduced to a startling total below 2.7 million in 1991. With
Well,
people fighting
half.
back and an attempted coup by Communist Party opposition, Gorbachev's Soviet Union was in its final hours. On December 25th, 1991, President Mikhail Gorbachev announced to the world that the USSR was no more. This was the end of the Soviet Union altogether, as it could no longer.
I might be wrong here, but I don't know if she's going to talk about this. But I heard this might be. I have no information on this. I just heard about it. That Yeltsin and a bunch of other presidents of their own republics. He was the president of Russia and he wanted to be the leader. But because Gorbachev was the leader of the Soviet Union, he wasn't the ruler of Russia. He was the ruler of the Soviet Union. So Yeltsin went behind his back with other presidents in a forest somewhere, and they decided this is it. We all become our own kings, our own presidents, quote unquote, and we dissolve this so that we all gain power. I don't know. maybe I'm completely
could
wrong here. That's
withstand
what I
the
heard.
weight of its mistakes. At 7:32 p.m., the flag of the Russian Federation rose in the place of the Soviet flag atop the Kremlin. The new president, Boris Yeltsin, would take the helm, now the leader of one nation
Look at
with
this.
15 new neighbors who had once been joined together. We are now living in a new world, rang the words of the last president of the Soviet Union. The answer to why the Soviet Union collapsed may differ depending on who you ask. Gorbachev believes it was a result of Chernobyl, while others point to his own policies.
Yeah, Gorbachev was not a
and
good leader.
glasnost.
At least,
Still,
let me say this. He was maybe a good person, but he was not a strong leader. And there's a huge difference between both. Uh, at least from what I was presented in this video. I want to say this again. I don't have more information on Gorbachev. I don't really want to give my complete opinion on him because I don't know that much. I just know that his policies were way
others
too
blame the broken economy or
radical.
decaying military. The reality is
It was
likely
a
the
combination
sum
of
each
everything.
of these
Yeah.
theories. Without the economic chaos, perestroika would have not been necessary. If not for glasnost, the Chernobyl scandal may have not been so easy to uncover. Furthermore, without glasnost, drafted soldiers would have not been able to speak so openly about the despicable conditions they were forced into.
So basically, by showing transparency and quote unquote free elections, you fucked yourself over. So for future leaders out there who are listening to this, don't be a good guy.
Military
Fuck
may
the
have not
people.
shrunk so much.
I mean,
Also, may have not
it's
been
just
so
it's so
dangerously
demoralizing
reduced if
that
Gorbachev
doing the wrong thing is the right thing in this case.
had not been so extensively determined to begin appeasing the West. Or maybe the Afghanistan war took too much of a toll on the military and the economy. More military spending and strength
And
could have kept
corruption.
the satellite
Corruption
states
was
in line and prevented the Berlin Wall from falling. Every potential reason for the dissolution of the USSR is intertwined with yet another reason. Even Gorbachev's theory of how his union fell apart is only a potential turning point, not the sole cause. The reality is that it took a series of mistakes and miscalculations to bring down the Soviet Union. And while it may be easy to blame the last president for destroying his own nation,
yeah.
it's important to note that a majority of his own mistakes were simply attempts to correct the flaws of his predecessors.
That's a
In
good
all
point.
actuality,
That's a good
the
point.
reason why the Soviet Union collapsed comes down to a long string of repeated failures on behalf of its leadership.
Yeah, thank you guys for listening to this video. I hope you enjoyed this. I hope you were able to learn as much as I did. This was really enlightening to me. It was insane because when you see this video, when you watch the video and you understand that sometimes being a good person, quote unquote, is not the right thing to do. Uh, it's not the right because glasnost and perestroika were on paper good move forwards. It was moving the Soviet Union in a good direction, at least on paper. But it eventually led, as he said, did it lead to its own downfall in many ways? I guess. But then again, disclaimer: I don't have enough information to really give my opinion on this. I haven't researched it nearly enough. So it was a very interesting video. Let me put this way, and I hope you learned something from this. And thank you for listening. And I'll see you guys in the next video. Ciao.